Welcome to the Rebekah Panepinto Project. Today I am very excited to host Greg Copley. He's the Sales and Marketing Director for ACF Technologies and helps organizations to increase their sales, drive higher customer satisfaction, and develop an improved customer engagement model. With over 12 years of experience within enterprise software, project management, and demand generation, Greg has a passion for delivering innovative and impactful solutions that enhance the customer experience. He is also the co-host of the CX Insider podcast, where they create meaningful and entertaining conversations about all things customer experience. They feature guests from various industries and backgrounds who share their insights, challenges, and best practices within customer experience. Through this podcast, Greg's aim is to educate, inspire, and connect with CX professionals and enthusiasts all across the globe. We have an amazing conversation about this today, and we also talk heavily about Greg's expertise within customer experience of the banking and finance industries. Enjoy the show. Greg, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Since we connected a few months ago, I've been really encouraged by all that you're doing and learning more about you and your business, and I'm very excited to showcase that on the podcast today.
Thank you. I was equally inspired by your activities on LinkedIn, so maybe the feeling is mutual because I like the content you've been putting out too. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so you've built your career primarily on this element that has been part of my career as well, just not the focal point. So when we started talking about where you focused, it was super intriguing me to think to bring that more into my day-to-day. And it's really about the customer experience. You're all about making sure customer experiences are consistent, and especially as they become more and more digitized, that there's an element of it that stays human as well. So tell us a little bit about that progression of really even what brought you into customer experience and how you're serving customers with it today.
Sure. I think the best place probably to start is I got into technology from university and then ended up in this enterprise software world. And as I've been in enterprise software, I've noticed that when deploying these sort of technologies, they're really advanced, they do amazing things. But all of that is always second to really what the customer feels about your brand and feels about the processes that they're actually experiencing. And then what long-term effects that actually has, obviously, as them as a client to that business. And I feel like for years, I felt that there was a bit of a disconnect in some respect. Like, there's a lot of technology and innovation going on in the background, and how much is it really impacting the customer? And so that's what's really always intrigued me. So, I guess over my career, I've always tried to make sure that any technology or ideas we're implementing with our customers, etc., we really are just making sure that we are considering customer first and foremost in any decision that we make, whether it's design or it's process oriented. Really, just keeping the customer, I guess, at the heart of it, and just then, I guess, reverse engineering what makes that customer experience so good, short term and long term. Because I think when we think about customer experience, it's quite easy to think about just the short term effects of a bad interaction or one sort of service failure. But actually, I think customers and brand loyalty, if you really go down that path, it's about a long-term view of a customer and their perception of your brand and things like that. So yeah, that's where I've sort of always been in terms of my career and implementing technologies, but really trying to make sure the customer's at the heart of it all. So yeah.
Well, the nice thing is today in some industries, there's a lot of companies that have cheat codes to accelerate customer experience because they're setting the standard. And Amazon, for example, comes to mind, or an Instagram user experience. Like, there's a lot of things that different industries can learn about the level of attentiveness to their customers and the workflows that they've already tried and tested over, maybe a decade or two, that as people get more and more familiar with interfacing with social media and different retailers like that, they're going to have that expectation of how they interface with these other industries as well. So what are some learnings that maybe come to mind as you look cross vertical, cross industry, of people doing it really well that can influence other industries to say, hey, like, be more like Amazon in maybe this respect?
That's a really good question. I think maybe the answer will always be dependent on the industry that an organization is operating in, because it will sort of govern, I guess, the expectations of, let's say, a customer. But even on that topic, I would say that something over the last X number of years has changed, where I think we all have a much higher level of expectation around service. And whether that is in, let's say, a fast-paced retail environment. You expect a certain level of service and agility, and I would like to do this and not quite this. Not just sort of ordering just from the menu and you can adapt the menu. But I think we also have that same level of expectation even in other areas of our life, let's say like healthcare. I think, over the last few years, that's been a massive sort of shift. And really, I think honestly, everything is just rising at the same pace now, where you expect to have the same level of service across any type of business. Um, so I guess that sort of encapsulates everything there. But in reality, regardless of what business you're in, I think the businesses that we tend to work with that are seeing the highest success is especially around technology. I'll talk about technology quite a bit because I guess I work in that space. But when implementing new technologies and ideas, they can be some of the most incredible things for your business. But it is the age-old question of, is the technology enhancing the experience, or is it actually another barrier? And quite commonly, believe it or not, in projects, we see requirements come up from the business. And those requirements are actually to no benefit to the customer, really. It's purely an internal process benefit, or potentially like an internal um, reporting and data metrics driven benefit, for example. And I think that's something to always keep an eye on, is that when you are building requirements around improving processes or implementing new technologies, it's really making sure that those requirements that are driving that project, the companies that we see really winning out, are ones that really make sure they prioritize the customer experience over the internal process. And I think I love banking and I work in banking a lot. A lot of our clients are in that financial space, but I think banking would definitely hold its hands up to say that it's very guilty of having quite complicated processes that are to the detriment of a customer, when they themselves would love to have a simpler process or a simpler experience, but because of process, whether it's wanted or not, that doesn't always play out. Um, I think that's one major thing that I've seen, and maybe a good example of that in the banking space is looking at why these digital players, these digital new banks, Monzo, Starling, etc., these pure digital banks, they are winning in great numbers versus, let's call, traditional retail banks, because they have that ability to prioritize the customer user experience, because they are maybe not burdened with legacy technology. And I think that's a really good example, honestly, of how you have to be careful. If you don't prioritize CX and you don't prioritize UX and go through that real process of change that is difficult, competitors can arise and they can start to eat away at your market share. Again, maybe that's just a banking example, and I guess you could apply the same in other industries. But they're the sort of, I guess, to answer your question shortly, that's the sort of example of where I see it playing out for the best.
Well, the interesting thing about banking too is not only are there new banks coming on the scene, but that audience and those customers are turning over, and there's a whole new group of folks who are wanting to interface with a bank completely differently than the folks who have maybe already accumulated their wealth and maybe want a personal interaction. Most people, I would say probably 30 and under, never stepped foot in a bank, or maybe haven't ever stepped foot in a bank, and are simply interfacing through a mobile app and email and things like that. And so that's got to become that much more digital, and just ease added to it of communication, but still maintaining a high level of security, which sometimes those can be competing scenarios versus collaborative scenarios.
Yep. I think that does also maybe raise a very important point, which is that with technology at our fingertips today, there is almost no excuse to create the full range of choice for customers. So like you were saying there, let's say there is an assumption that the younger demographic maybe won't ever step foot in a branch, for example, a physical location. There may be some that will, and equally to the other end of the age spectrum, let's say, you might assume that people prefer to go to a branch and have that experience. But I feel that in today's world, I feel like it's this blended matrix of people prefer choice, and people prefer to choose between maybe a video appointment, let's say, or potentially an in-person appointment. And I think everyone should have that power of choice. And the reality is that when it comes to your customer experience, or sorry, your customer engagement model, that is not commonly the case. If you just go on to all the major banks that you're aware of and go and look at their customer experience, when it comes to, let's say book an appointment, for example, as a use case that we work on in particular. When you look at that, the amount of organizations that have either a consistent or a true omni-channel process is very, very few, which means that they're inhibiting potentially the customer's preference of journey, which has a knock-on effect to their experience. I would like to speak to someone about this, yes, but I'd like to speak to them on video because I can't make it out of the house next week, for example, because I'm busy with work and whatever else. And I think that's where technology can be really empowering. And I think is an interesting, thing to try and prioritize is, can you prioritize the power of choice to customers? Sometimes at the expense of, we have to work out how we make that work internally as a business. But if we can do it, it really makes us stand out from the crowd.
Well, and these banks are sometimes begging you to move your money over, or incentivizing you. Hey, if you open this account, you get $500 and XYZ and different interest rates and credit offers. So if you're not really cognizant and intentional about servicing and maintaining the attention of your user, somebody will, more than any other industry, try to sweep in and steal it. So I think the mobile experience is huge. Companies in finance and banking, that's, I would think, a heavy place to be investing these days. What are some of the other areas when you're especially first interfacing with a financial client of yours, for them to prioritize to make sure that customer experience is really taken care of from the beginning, so that they can work through maybe the harder pieces or the more resource intensive customer experience solutions as time progresses?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think one of the approaches that we tend to take is try to holistically look at their customer engagement model and look at what their goals are around each channel. So when I see a customer engagement model, I'm really just seeing different channels of engagement: in person, phone, video, telephone, call centers, etc., chatbots, for example. There's endless, and social media, of course, there's endless growing channels of customer engagement. And I think with each channel, I guess a business will tend to have an objective about what they hope to do. If it's Twitter, it's probably just bringing in, or X now, it's probably just like making sure they don't miss really angry customers. Bring that in, let's get it into the business, let's try and solve that. People are not tend to be looking to necessarily buy from Twitter. They're normally looking to rant, to be honest. Whereas if you take, for example, your website or like a chatbot, or, let's say a physical location like a branch, there's different sort of objectives. And we always say, start with that. What's your model look like? What channels do you have? And what is your ultimate goal, or your primary objective with that channel? And then from there, work out what makes a good customer experience. So if it's your branch, well, what about your branch makes a worthwhile customer experience? The ability to, like, let's say, pre-stage, for example, with an appointment, or let them know that you're going to arrive, so that the staff can then better prepare. Those sort of things are really, I think, simple, but actually really important. So we holistically look at that customer engagement model. We look at each channel, and we work out what's best, and therefore where's best to start when it comes to like changing or adapting that process. And I guess the second thing, if I was to really nail it down to two, is, to be honest, is something I touched on earlier, is looking at each of those sort of requirements that is driving a new project, and really try to like scrutinize it and pick holes in it, not for the purpose of being difficult, but for the purpose of, making sure that they'd considered all options. Do we truly need that? Is that to the best benefit of the customer, or is it really for a business perspective? And I think normally, if you start with those two things, looking at the bigger picture and then looking at the detail, there's a guy, Gary Vaynerchuk, he talks about, in business, he talks about like clouds and dirt. That's really important. So starting at the very top, the big macro picture, and then also looking at the very small, minute, details of, are our opening times displayed correctly on our website? Really sort of at the detail level. And I think if you do that, I think you tend to create something that is going to be net positive for business and for customer, I would say. And then Yeah, maybe if I got, am I right to give a third example? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. The third thing we definitely always focus on as well is the staff experience. And it's so commonly overlooked, the importance of that staff experience, and how bought in a staff member, a team, a manager or management is bought into the actual process change that's maybe going to occur. Because ultimately this is, this is change management. We are changing a process, you're implementing a new technology, and it has all the potential. But if the staff don't believe in it, and the staff don't know how to use that tech, and they don't know why that technology is there to either help them or customer, then you really are just, you're inhibiting the full potential to be realized, I think. And we really try and make sure that in a business, if we're working with, project leads and executive sponsors, we're always saying to them, training, awareness, are your staff aware of this project? Are they just going to be dump this new technology on the last day and say, oh, by the way, tomorrow we're using this? Because that doesn't fill them with confidence, but it also doesn't fill them with that element of pride about their role. Because if they feel like you've gone to, all this trouble to, procure and implement new technology and spend months delivering a project, and then they are seen as sort of an afterthought, it doesn't really make you feel that valued, I would say, in a business. So we always try to bring in all user groups from the start. So whether it's a senior executive level and like their job is to, you know, drive change, for example, across the business, or it's someone, for example, who's actually customer facing from a branch, from a call center, we try to bring them in early on a project so we get some feedback and input. And usually if they do that, well, in our projects, if we do that, it does bode well long term, because one of the upsides to that is that, especially if you have a member of staff that is among the customer facing, tip of the spear area of the business, to me that they can then be a real advocate, and they can truly drive within their colleagues the reason for implementing this technology, and then they become your advocates. And it's no longer like this management external third party thing that's happening. It's actually, no, this truly is going to benefit you, and you're going to feel empowered, hopefully, to use this new process or tech. um, I think there's a lot to be said for that. In all honesty, there's a lot to be said for that, and I think it's quite commonly overlooked, and certain roles are seen as like an afterthought and stuff like that.
Now, you brought up open banking, which I am a huge fan of. Rocket
Mm.
Money, for example, falls into
Yep.
that category. Many others that are super helpful to help you have a vision of like your portfolio situation and all these different, like you said, multiple accounts that you may have.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see that advancing and becoming even more impactful from a digital transformation perspective? And like, 5, 8, 10 years down the road, any like ideas of how much more open and like just
Mm.
intriguing open banking and the opportunity can be within the market?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to start this by saying I'm probably not the person to ask where open banking will take the financial world 8 years from now, because that is not my expertise. And I'll definitely say that first and foremost. But if you do, if open banking is something you're familiar with or not, the open banking is just this new technology layer that allows, that has basically driven the banking sector to open up banking related data, like our financial data, to third parties. And it's a safe layer, and it's designed all around security, etc. But it opens the doors to an unlimited number of organizations that can build services and technologies around our banking data. Whereas before open banking, that wasn't really the case. It was your data existed between you and your bank, and that was it. So I'm definitely not the person to say where it will be 5 or 10 years from now, because I don't honestly know. But what I do know, and what I've seen so far, is already those innovations are taking place. You can already download probably hundreds and hundreds of apps that are using the open banking layer, although you know it, whether you know it or not. So that's huge. Um, if you then also look at other models, like, there's a company called One Banks. They are using that open banking layer to ultimately create physical locations that allow multiple banks to operate at one location, which is very intriguing and a very innovative model, but one that seems to be playing out really well here in the UK. not to like plug our own podcast, but we recently did have their CTO on our podcast on CX Insider. And yeah, in that episode we talked with them about their vision for the future. So maybe his name's Andy Wilmot. Maybe Andy is the better person to ask where the industry will be. But I would say that's a good example of the open banking layer playing out in physical form. It's not just digital form. It's not just going to be another app, another service. This is actually using that layer to create a physical environment where financial organizations can share a location that allows them to save costs, allows them to reach communities that maybe it's difficult to reach because of cost, for example. So to have a branch costs X per year. If you're sharing that cost, then that's a huge upside, because um, physical locations in the banking space are not just about cash, but cash is, of course, central to that. Access to cash, depending on which country you're in, and there is no rule about a wealthier country uses less cash and less wealthy uses more. That's not actually the truth of cash at all. And it's completely dependent on where you are in the world, what your life looks like, how far you are from, let's say, a large city. And there's so many variables. So access to cash is actually really important for so many people globally. But even in the UK, where we have quite a high adoption of, let's say, digital financial technology, there's still this huge need for cash. And there probably always will be, as far in the future as you want to cast that sort of projection, there will be a need for that. And I think like ideas like that is where it's intriguing, because the open banking layer was probably created with this idea that, yeah, we could create these new technologies and distribute the opportunity, but it's not just digital, it's physical form too. That's maybe I guess the first sort of main thing I'd say on that. But maybe a second idea to look at, quite a timely one right now, is ChatGPT and the latest version of ChatGPT, version 4, for example. I was listening to a podcast the other day of Sam Altman, who was, then wasn't, now is again the CEO of OpenAI, the company that creates ChatGPT. He's got some very interesting thoughts about how technology, very advanced technology like this, how it has this level of adoption. And he raised the point I thought was really good. He talked about the fact that really advancing technology, let's say like open banking or, uh, artificial intelligence in all forms, for example, when you have these really advanced technologies, it's not great to have this amazing technology and it completely engulf the world and change things overnight. It's great to have that technology, but it's good to grow with it as people, rather than it just, bang, land on our desk and all of a sudden our worlds are changing. We might feel like that around technologies like ChatGPT, but actually in reality, we've all just gone on since ChatGPT has been released. We've adopted it. It's been put into lots of technologies. It is amazing. It's fun. It's doing great things, but we've all just gone on with our lives. We go and see our family. We still hang out at Christmas. Like, it's not completely transformed our world like a lot of people estimate. That will take years and years and years. And I think maybe the same with that analogy, or I guess, or example, you could probably apply that to open banking. Is that open banking right now is growing, and it's an incredible transformation of technology, but it's not going to change your life overnight, really. And I think the future potential of that's where it will be 5-10 years from now. It will change our worlds. Exactly how, I'm not sure, but I think it's good that we get to grow with it rather than it grow on its own and then all of a sudden our lives look completely different, where there's no bank branches and we're completely in this different world. That's not really the reality.
Now, Greg, I have one final question for you, and it's around principles. And I want to hear from you. What is the guiding principle that you've lived by to be successful in business?
Surround yourself with people that are definitely better than you. Like, honestly, I know that's maybe a bit cheesy, but I've been so fortunate with mentors in my career, and I've tried to seek them out at times when I felt like maybe they weren't there. But for my career, I've always had people around me who are definitely way better than I am in so many areas, whether that's, marketing or sales or strategy and ideas, I'm always trying to surround myself wherever I can and buy people coffee, take people for dinner to try and pick their brains. And for me personally, that has played out quite well, and I enjoy that. But I also get the massive upside of of learning from people that are better than I am, and I try to take that idea, of course, when it comes to things like hiring people, and people that we employ at ACF and bring on board. We're looking for various things, but one of the things I'm looking for is, do they know more about a particular subject here or there than I do? And in some settings, that's not very hard because I don't know much. But in some areas, if you can bring more knowledge and experience and ideas than I have or we have as a team, your contribution is just exponentially better to us as a business, and that plays out in better deliveries, better customer experience from our perspective. So that's honestly probably the thing that I guess I could attribute to, or say that's probably affected my career the most, is try to find people that are much more knowledgeable in given areas than you are, and try and just buy them a Starbucks every now and then. People like a free coffee, so doing that's played out pretty well. Have you ever had anything like that yourself? Have you
Oh, absolutely.
had mentors and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of mentorship and
Yeah.
extending just networking hands,
Yeah.
and don't know where this could go, don't know how we can help each other, but we're all better for being in each other's lives and sharing ideas and different perspectives on scenarios. So I'm a huge fan. I've been a networker for years and years
Yeah.
and years, because you never know where those relationships are gonna go and expand for you in your future.
Yep.
So.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Greg, you're such a pleasure. This has been amazing. I'm sure everyone who comes in contact with you would say they have a great customer experience. So thanks for coming on the show. I'm really excited to share the CX Insider podcast. So, folks, check that out where you can learn
Yep.
more about Greg and all the amazing work that you are doing.
Thank you. And you're going to be coming on our podcast now, so
I'll be there.
soon we'll get that organized, and then we'll have a round 2 conversation. But thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we'll make it happen. We'll talk soon, Greg.